It's lovely to be back. I was at this event, I think 3 years ago, where I felt my journey started on my fellowship award, which I'm currently coming to the end of year 1. So it's lovely to be able to sort of pass on some helpful hints and tips. So yeah, as a doctoral research fellow, I have to obviously put this disclaimer up that the views expressed in this are by myself, not that of the NHS, the NIHR, or the Department of Health and Social Care. So this document, this image was shown to me by Professor Durham, talking about how a fellowship is not a very short procedure. It's not a very short time frame. It is very much a journey. And the pinnacle is to get to the Emerald Castle at the end by following the yellow brick road. But there are lots of hurdles and lots of aspects you'll have to jump through to get there. And it is tough and it is arduous, but it's the sort of experience that will build character as well as giving you some great opportunities when you get there. So if you keep that in mind throughout the presentation, it is a journey. I do apologise that I may duplicate some of the content that's already been spoken to today by other panel members, but this is sort of just my take and the sort of little hints and tips as to where I can be of support to anyone going through the process. So I am a doctoral research fellow, so I've not at the advanced stage, but I can give you my experience for that. There are certainly 3 aspects that I would split this presentation up into, and 3 to consider when you're putting together a fellowship. That is preparation, submission, and interview. So in preparation for it, I think I would be quite rightly saying that it takes time to build an application. It's not a quick fix. And I would say at least 9 months prior to your submission date would be advantageous to carry out and start thinking about preparing your fellowship application. It's important to give supervisors, peer reviewers, time to give you full comments and to be able to reflect these comments, as well as ensuring you've got appropriate patient and public involvement, amongst other things. The 3 Ps is something that kind of acronym that I was told from the very beginning, and it's still drilled into me to this day: the person, the project, and the place. And I think I heard Professor Kaner's talk at the end there saying that the panel members kind of equally weight these, and that was certainly my experience and from my feedback and from peer reviewers. And it's important that you as yourself put yourself in the highest regard, that you do sell yourself, you give yourself the best opportunity to be that research leader of the future. But at the same time, you have to have a methodologically sound project, which is going to be of benefit to the patients and to the general public, as well as doing it in the correct place. Now, Newcastle has got a fantastic track record for fellowships, and we've got a very good, slick process here to support our academic trainees moving into fellowship applications. But it goes beyond that. It's about your supervisory team. And to give you an example, when Professor Ranking peer-reviewed my application, she found a glaring error that I didn't have a qualitative supervisor despite doing some sort of small qualitative work. So that's the sort of idea that you've got to consider having a proper and thorough supervisory team. In preparation, similarly, read the guidance document. I know it's a potentially long document, but it's very useful and there's some really good guidance in there. And kind of similarly, what I've said is in terms of to try and boost yourself as a person, you really need to maximize your CV. And there are plenty of opportunities to do that, whether it be publications, presentations, grant fundings, leadership roles. These are all aspects that the panel, I'm assuming, taking into consideration about judging you as the person, and are you the right person to take forward this research and to become a research leader of the future. It's not just about this project in isolation. It's about thinking about, are you going to take forward the research agenda moving into the future? And again, don't be afraid to highlight any of your achievements, anything you think is relevant, other than maybe say winning your year 3 art prize, but it's important to consider all these achievements. What I found really useful was utilising previous successful applications, and the clinical academic office has these available. It was a lovely good afternoon sitting looking through applications, just looking at the way people had worded things, and also the sort of style that people had used, the language, and just to try and get their point across. So I would definitely highly recommend that as an opportunity. And engaging with the RDS, I was fortunate that I engaged with Nikki Rousseau very early on, who put me in touch with other people from Joe Lally at the PPI, Bronya, etc. And it's just getting, again, more people looking at your application, the more feedback that you can get, and it's just building a far more kind of robust application. In terms of PPI, and I'm sure this has been mentioned already, but it was definitely sort of impressed on me that it's integral to ensuring your application that it's not just tokenistic. And this is something that I would wholeheartedly agree with. It's something that you don't necessarily consider, but it's highly important. And the panel members, which included some patient and public representatives, were actually very keen to make sure that this was a well thought out process, given the fact that you're going to be asking for some taxpayers' money to improve research and improve patient care. It's important that you've obtained the opinions. And something I would certainly consider is taking that PPI beyond your participants. So don't just think about what impact it's going to have with your particular cohort or in your profession. Try and obtain that general public opinion, because if it's a public opinion, it's a wider context, it's more of a societal concern, as well as the patient cohort, that adds to the value and the impact that your research is going to have. The lay summary, which is part of your application, I actually got my sister and my auntie to read this, and my mum. So it should be something that would be readable to the lay summary, to the lay person, and they're the perfect people to be able to read that. And I've touched upon this, the last part of the preparation is this peer review. There are many people who can peer review, and as I've said, the more you have, the better feedback, the more slick your presentation becomes. You reduce those grammatical errors and those typos, but also it just reads a bit better. And the supervisory team and other senior academics within your school or institute are there to support you, but there are other people within the whole institute and university whom, if given enough time, can support. And finally, when you're considering putting together an application about, we've talked about the project, but particularly with the Doctoral Research Fellowship, it's also a training and development fellowship. And actually, this is a fantastic opportunity where you get to really put down what courses, what conferences you want to go to and attend to maximize your learning opportunity and to maximize your engagement. It's important to discuss what you've already done prior to your application. So if you've attended any courses that are relevant, or if you've done any sort of internal courses, put that down. But also, again, map your courses, be ambitious. And I certainly think that's something that I was quite keen to do, is to really maximize as much as I possibly could. And it's important to sort of highlight the gaps in your knowledge and where you're going to find that. Finally, we also have a fantastic internal training and development opportunities. So for example, there's Master Public Health modules here, which is a PhD student you're able to go and sit on. And some of them are entirely relevant to most sort of NIHR type-based research, given its more sort of translational end. So it's worthwhile considering, and again, it looks nice for the panel that you're combining that external and internal training. Now, this is my one key tip with costings. I left it to quite late on to do. It takes time to cost things properly, and to really cause yourself not a headache or a stress, I would suggest you get in touch with your costings officer as soon as possible. If you don't know the full cost of everything, that's fine, it can always be built upon. But that process of starting and getting it in the ball rolling makes life a lot easier. And similarly, consider how much you're going to cost in appropriately for your patients in public. The NIHR Involved document, and I think there's an updated document, actually gives you the payment for these participants, how much they should be paid. And again, that's something in your application form that should be reflected. If it's not in there properly, it does look a bit shoddy. So I think this sort of finally thinking about putting your application together, you need to be mindful of the NIHR's remit. Okay, so it needs to be the benefit of the patients. And that's something that I think from my particular project, I was really kind of thought at the integral message, the core of this application was how is it going to benefit the patients, the public, and the profession. And always consider those 3 Ps when putting it together to make sure that you absolutely maximize your potential chance of success. So now moving on to the submission, there's not really much you can say about submission, but as you know, the processes are slightly different to a few years back. And it's important that you include PPI in both. And what I mean by that is that it was in the second stage of my DRF, but it was important to still have that PPI presence integral through the content in the first stage. The website RMS is very simple to navigate, but it's important that you know your deadlines. They're very strict with the deadlines. And also you need different signatories to sign off on your deadlines. So it's important that they know that as well, because without their signatories, you can't submit it, and you don't want to be leaving it to the last minute when your head of school, for example, is on annual leave or skiing, as was the case in one of my colleagues. So finally, if you're successful and you get invited for interview, then you feel fantastic and it's great elation. And you think, yep, I'm halfway there. I feel as if I'm in good position. And then you think to yourself, crikey, I've got a big interview coming up and there's a lot of pressure put on yourself. You don't often have huge turnaround times. I think I had about 6 or 7 weeks to get from the second stage application being submitted to my interviews. I think, yeah, it was about 6 weeks. And I did feel very hot under the collar and very sweaty on numerous occasions when I was given some real grillings by various members of the academic office, by my head of school, by other members of the institute. But it's important to practice your presentation, really hone that skill and get that clear and consistent message across to the panel. You've only got 5 minutes in the doctoral fellowship, so it's really important that you get there. To kind of reintegrate yourself and ensure that the kind of place, there is obviously university PowerPoint template. So rather than using your own, I would suggest that you do use that, and it's available on the university webpage. And similarly, try and be a bit preemptive about your interviews. This is something I wasn't able to do because the panel members weren't up, because it was the first time they changed to the new structure. But I have checked and the panel members are there. So have a look at what your sort of field is and who your sort of panel members are likely to be, and just sort of have a bit of an idea of where they may go down with the question line. And it's also it's important to consider what questions you're going to have before going into the interview. There are some very generic questions that you're going to be asked. What is the impact? What is the benefit? Your methodologies. If you've got some abnormal costings, for example, be prepared to justify that. Where is your research going? And certainly don't ever think that it's going to be an easy ride. The panel members are willing you to do well, and they're encouraging. They really want to push you into action to make sure that their decision to fund you is the right decision. On the day, it's very simple here. It's a very straightforward thing, isn't it? But arrive early, or in some situations, possibly think about staying the night before. You don't want to miss your interview. And they were very clear that if you did miss your deadline, then that was kind of it. I'm not entirely sure if that's the case now, but certainly I don't think it looks good if you're arriving late. And when you do check in, you're given some information about who your lead interviewers will be. So at least that kind of maybe puts your mind at ease a little bit. Or in my situation, the lead interviewer actually turned not to be in the panel. It was someone else that he had to leave. So it was a bit of a rogue. It was a bit of a red herring, shall we say. The interview itself is a pretty daunting experience. There can be a range of about 20 to 25 panel members sitting in a U-shaped in front of you. And when you walk into that room, it's quite breathtaking, but it's something you just need to get on with, and you prepare for that. With your presentation, you have 5 minutes. Definitely stick to time. You will be cut at 5 minutes, and I think it is quite embarrassing to run over. So ensure that you've practiced that to the point of where you're really happy and slick with your timing. And I think this next point about trying to engage with all panel members, during the lead interview aspects when the questions, you can engage with just that panel member. But during your presentation, it's trying to engage every member. And I was expecting everyone to sit there perfectly listening to me, and it wasn't realistic. There were some people who didn't even look up from their screen. So it's trying to engage with people and trying to be smiling and happy, no matter how much your legs are shaking or how scared or worried or nervous you are, is to give that persona of being confident. And it's nice when you get some smiling faces coming back at you from the panel members. Then after the questions, you get sort of 10 minutes in the science and 10 minutes in your training and development, and that was quite rigidly stuck to. from who the lead interviewers were. And then I said you did have some questions from the patient and panel members, which were very insightful, and again were quite tasking, because it wasn't something I was expecting. The question I got asked when I was looking about including hardly reached groups within my PPI. So it was quite a left field question. So be prepared that you might get that curveball. And then finally, if there's any time left, there'll be some questions from the chair or other panel members. And certainly my chair that day really tried to not undermine my project, but almost said to the point, well, what's the point of this? I don't see, why can't you just prevent dental disease? And I don't think he was meaning to be nasty or to be interrogative, but it was about just making sure that I was absolutely dead certain that what my project was the right thing to do. So again, this become to the end of the presentation here. Once your interview is over, it's a hideous 7-week wait. Mine was 7 and a bit weeks, and I'd almost forget it. So in the time, I actually got myself a puppy. And a year on into PhD life, she's fantastic in supporting me. She's not very good at writing or giving me any kind of feedback on my comments, but she's always there for that kind of loving smile and reassurance. So, and it is the fantastic feeling when you get that email to say that you've been funded. So thank you very much for listening. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, please drop me an email. I'm happy to reply if I can be of any help. And this is, for anyone who's interested, this is my Doctor Research Fellowship project, which does have its own Twitter handle. If you would be so interested in following, I'm more than happy to do that. Thank you very much.